Welcome to the Daily Dawg. Today is Tuesday, September 30th. This is week 6 of the 2025 season, and it is the week of the Kentucky game. However, we have not moved on to the Kentucky yet. We are still wallowing in our sorrows a bit over the Alabama game and last week, and we still have a handful of things to break down and discuss before we're ready to start unpacking and looking at Kentucky, looking at the statistics of what we've done so far, what they've done so far, and start building up towards our predictions of what we think will happen in that game. Today's podcast, I think, is going to be what I'm calling the good, the bad, and the ugly. I don't know if it'll exactly follow that format. I do have good and bad and ugly. I don't know if I'll do it exactly in those segments. But let's just jump right in. There's still some good things. We broke down a lot of things about the game already, and we kind of just on Monday expressed our feelings and our concern. And I think the upshot of all of that was I came out of that saying, look, I still believe in our team. I'm still proud of our team. I'd rather lose a Bulldog than win any of these other teams, okay? I am a Bulldog through and through. But I'm also trying to be realistic. I'm also trying to bring us together in this conversation where we analyze and look at our team and try to measure our expectations. And the last few years, the expectation has been championships. We think each year we put a team out on the field that could be a national championship contender, and that's not an unreasonable expectation. At the end of the 2017 season, we found ourselves in the national championship game. We're back in the national championship game in the 2021 and 2022 seasons, and we were in the playoff last year as well. So we've had multiple opportunities where the team executed enough on the field during the season to get to the end of the season and have a chance for a championship. Other seasons that didn't make the playoffs, like we talked about 2023, were still a year where you were number one most of the year. You were undefeated for the regular season. You go to the SEC championship game and you lose to another championship caliber program in Alabama. And now we've lost to Alabama again. We talked about how, though, last year, these are different games. For the first time in a while, we're having a home and away series with Alabama. And as you well know, it's like the first time in 10 years. I think it was 2015 was the last time Alabama had come to Sanford Stadium. So we all had a lot of anticipation, and we thought the difference in these last 10 games where we've gone 1-9, this time we get Alabama between the hedges. And on paper, coming into the game, not just our opinion, we're ranked 5th in the country. They're ranked 17th. So coming into the game, there's a consensus opinion that Georgia's a better team and playing at home. So you think we should have lost. We think we should have won, and disappointingly, we lost. So we're still dealing with the aftermath of that. But like we said, as we start to look up and look ahead, as disappointed as we are, we know that last year's team lost basically the same team, Alabama, in the same week, last week of September, and then went on to make the playoff and win the SEC championship. Not a small feat, and something we can't lose sight of and be proud of. So again, championship team. Are we a championship team? There's a lot of reason to suspect that we're a championship worthy team, or at least one of the key competitors for the SEC championship this year and the national championship, or at least getting into that playoff. So we keep measuring ourselves against the other teams, and each week that's going to change because the other teams, both in the SEC and the national picture, are kind of changing each week. Alabama kind of came in on the outside looking in, if you looked at playoff predictions, because they'd lost to Florida State, only won a couple games against teams they should have won, and generally speaking, hadn't yet put anything on their resume that says, yes, this makes them playoff worthy. Well, now they have. They came to Sanford Stadium. They beat the then number 5 team in the country. Now we're the number 12 team in the country. That's the zero-sum nature of this situation. You beat your opponent on the field, and then all of a sudden the quality of that win or that loss, if you took a loss, goes downhill. Fortunately, when you take the loss, the quality goes up. Alabama, we didn't lose to the 17th ranked team. Now they're the 10th ranked team. Alabama, unfortunately for them, beat the 5th ranked team on the road, but now we're the 12th ranked team. So how each team does the rest of the season is going to matter a lot, both on resume and give us an idea of what we're looking at and what we can expect as we break down these future games and potential SEC championship or playoff opponents. I did say, though, unequivocally, I want to be clear that one of the things that was a very sad moment for me during the game and after the game was to say, maybe my expectation that we are going to make it to the playoff and we have as good a chance as anybody I don't think I've tried to think or say that we're going to get to the playoff and storm through and win. I just think that as I looked at the other teams that were the top 10, top 5 teams, and I felt like we're one of those, that they're as flawed as we are. We all have strengths and weaknesses. There are no juggernaut teams. I've said it over and over again. I'm sure you're tired of hearing that. So, but it's true. And we talked about the eras of football and how we're in a different era. And so we have to adjust, and we have to adjust our expectations. And so now we're going to adjust our expectations and say, well, look, we're still on the fringe of the playoff discussion. The polls have us down around 12. If we were 12th in the playoff poll, that would be a problem, because if Memphis, let's say, or if Boise State got back in it, or whoever, Tulane, or whoever that group of 5 team is that's going to get a spot in the playoff, if they were ranked below 12th, then even though if we were 12th, you would say, okay, we could make it in as the 12 seed. Well, if that group of 5 team or a conference champion is below us, ranked 15th or 16th, then they're going to jump up and take that spot. So 12th is a little bit of a precarious spot, kind of say on the edge. You're right there at the edge. But look, the playoffs aren't happening tomorrow, and there's a lot of season left, and we've got a lot of key games to go through. We got a game this week. We don't think it's a key game. Kentucky has been a tough out the last 5, 6, 7 years, but each of the last 2 or 3 years, it looks like Kentucky has taken a step down. And this is another one of those moments. There's not any obvious star players on Mark Stoops' team. There's not obvious draft pick quarterback or 1 or 2 players out there that really concern you that you're going to have to deal with. It looks like a pretty mediocre or mid team. And maybe that's being generous. So we expect to get back on the horse this week. We know that there's a lot of quotes and information out there that the players are mad, they're upset, they feel like they missed their opportunity, they know they can do better, and I'm excited about that. So let's jump back into the good, the bad, the ugly. That's reviewing where we are. And so we're going to take another crack here at just trying to get over and get past the Alabama game, but talking about the information so we sort of digest it as we go here. I mean, I say talk about the information, talk about what we saw. So again, the point that I guess I'm making here in the opening of the show is to say, look, I am modifying my stance. I still think we're a playoff team. I still think we have a chance to round into maybe a team who could advance through the playoffs and be a national championship contender. I think we're still an SEC championship contender. And there's a lot to play out in this. So nothing is done yet. Nothing is set in stone. But I do think that my expectation of exactly how good this Georgia team is, meaning I'm set that we are a competitor for that championship if and when we get to the playoff, that we could do what we did last year, advance back to the SEC championship and win against another top team. My perception of that's taken a step back. And mostly that's based on the fact that, look, we knew this was a young team, yet again, each year, and it's probably undervalued how much talent we lost, because we didn't see as much star first round draft choice, 4 guys off of the defense going in the first round. We didn't see that, although we had 2 guys go, our edge pass rushers. So I guess to a certain degree, is it any surprise that we look here now where we've talked about one of our top pass rushers or backup or second level pass rushers from last year left and went to Missouri and is doing well at Missouri, and our top 2 guys are in the NFL right now and we're top draft choices. So I guess it's not really shocking when we look at the deficiency on pass rush and say, oh my gosh. And we've just been used to the idea that, again, reload, right? We're not rebuilding, we're reloading. Well, we're back into that era. Like I said, this is more like the 80s. We've fallen back into an era where you're going to need some help. You're going to need teams around you to do some things. You're going to need some breaks. You're going to put the best team on the field you can. And then you're going to go out in these games like we had last week, where you're playing a team with similar talent or similar aspirations and realistic capabilities. And it's maybe going to be a coin flip game. It's going to be a 50-50 game. And so now we've had 2 of these games back to back, right? Tennessee and Alabama were back to back games where both teams are sort of giving and taking punches, and either team could win. And we did all the little things right in the Tennessee game and got all the breaks. And I'm sure Tennessee went out of that just as frustrated as we walk out of the Alabama game. We turn around in the Alabama game, and even though in some ways we didn't dig any deeper a hole, we were down 14-0 to Alabama in the not in the first quarter. Actually, Alabama didn't score their second touchdown until the beginning of the second quarter, but they piled up most of the drives and they were on the precipice of scoring when the quarter expired, and then they scored quickly at the beginning of the second quarter. So we find ourselves a couple minutes into the second quarter down 14-0. At the end of the first quarter against Tennessee, we find ourselves down 21-7. So in both cases, you're down 2 touchdowns. And your defense really has not put up much of a stop thus far. So we had that situation in both games. In both games, we fight back and we have an opportunity to win. We had a better opportunity to win at Tennessee because we actually took the lead. We took the lead narrowly, then we added to it. Not enough, right? We ended up with just a 6-point lead, with 2 field goals. But when we talked about how disappointing that was, if we'd gotten touchdowns, we'd have been able to stretch away and we wouldn't have ended up in overtime. But we did enough on the field to take a lead, even if it was a small lead and even if we gave it back. So we were back and forth. We were fighting the whole time in the Alabama game to try to take the lead. And again, that's where the consternation comes in over the 4th down call. Turns out to be such a big deal because you could have tied the game up, and we didn't. We never got over the hump despite the fact that we played so well throughout the game. Or, well, maybe not so well throughout the game, but you played well enough. Once you got past the first quarter, you righted the ship. You had that swoon at the end of the second quarter where they score the touchdown just before the half, but you come out in the second half and you shut them down. You hold them to much less yardage, much less time with the ball, and you get the ball more and you have the opportunity. So maybe it's overstating to say we played so well. The point really is just that, look, we gave ourselves a chance to win, but you never really felt like you never tied the game up. You never took the lead, unlike the Tennessee game. So let's focus on a couple of the things. And I want to start, like I said, the good, the bad, the ugly. That's sort of the idea for today. So the good, I want to start working towards feeling better. I want to start towards moving on in the season. And that's part of the perspective I was trying to say is, okay, what I come out of this with, I said yesterday, the upshot of the long podcast yesterday, and as we all just sort of emoted and worked through our feelings, and we all, I think, all felt the same way. The upshot is, I do think I have a little less sense of where this team is right now, or I think I have to adjust my expectations and say, look, this could still be a great season. This could still be a championship season, but I'm not as confident it should be a championship season. We'll have to see what happens on the field, and we're going to need to see the team develop more. We're going to see the need more people emerge. So let's talk about what we did see that was good. Okay, first and foremost, the fire, passion, and energy, which has become the motto of this team, was absolutely there. This team never gave up. They never looked overwhelmed. They never looked like, no matter how bad, and this is true in the Tennessee game too, with the 110,000 people screaming at you at Neyland Stadium, and with the crowd juiced here in Sanford Stadium this last week, under no circumstances did our team look like deers in the headlights. They didn't look frozen in the moment. They never looked like the moment was too big for them. Whatever happened, and we'll continue to break it down and try to look at what happened in the first half and the first quarter of each of these games. But whatever it wasn't that this was too much for them. It wasn't that these guys can't handle it. And even whatever it was, they didn't shrink or back away from it. They didn't do anything but keep playing. And I think all of the Bulldog mantras that we've come to know kind of applied. Keep chopping, right? They just kept chopping wood. They kept playing the play. They kept playing the next play, no matter what had happened and how the rest of us might have felt watching it. And in each chance, they fought back in the game against a highly talented, good opponent who had been beating them up to this point. These games could have gone sideways. They could have gotten away from them. You often see, 21-7 against Tennessee and 14-0 against Alabama. It could have been 31-3 at the half. And we've seen that happen to lesser Georgia teams in the past. And it's frustrating. And then maybe you fight back and you make the score more respectable in the end. You see that a lot. A game that finishes that's not as close as the score looks. And that's because, the other team puts third and fourth stringers in the game, and you fight back and you put some points on, and it gets more respectable. Maybe you force them into having to put second and third stringers or first stringers back in just to make sure you don't get any closer than a couple scores. That's not what happened here. In both of these games, Tennessee and Alabama, Georgia keeps, the pressure on them the whole time. Alabama, had to exhale. I'm sure if you're an Alabama fan, we all keep thinking and talking about the hex and how awful this feels as a Georgia fan to keep losing to the same team over and over again. But I think one of the things I have at least a little solace in, and I thought it during the game too, I am sure that as Alabama fans watch Georgia get it to 24-21 and then get down into the red zone and have a chance to tie the game or take the lead, I'm sure Alabama fans were thinking, oh crap, here we go again, right? We're going to lose this game. We've been bad on the road. We don't necessarily believe in Kalen DeBoer. And all of that would have been true. You'd be hearing nothing but like Kalen DeBoer, is like, hey, he's a dragon slayer. He can go out and beat the top teams. He's got to be a little sharper with some of these other games. But that's the narrative that comes out of that. That's how fast one thing changes. That's how fast a not made field goal or a drop touchdown pass could be, right? And so it's a real change of the emotion that let's say that Taylor catches that touchdown and nobody scores again. It's just a defensive battle. Nobody can make any headway, and we end up winning the game 28-24. Well, the whole narrative is going to be different, right? Georgia's the team that can't be beat no matter how they get down. They find a way. Kalen DeBoer is the guy who can't win on the road and can't win the big game, and Bama fans now have to look at a sixth loss inside of less than a season and a half. And so, everything is different. So, and that's how fast everything can be different for us as we look down the road down this season. But so I am happy to say that, look, I was proud of the way the team comported themselves. I'm proud of the way they played. They never gave up. They never looked beat. They played with fire, passion, and energy, even when they were getting beat. And so I think that that's something to be proud of and something to build on, right? So I think that, and again, just take a look at what they did. Let's break it down just for a second on the positives. And this isn't just trying to be glass half full kind of guy. This is, now that it's over and we've accepted everything we've just said about where we think we are and being realistic about where this team maybe is and maybe can go, and we're moderating our expectations and stepping back, but still thinking, look, there's an opportunity. Well, where is the opportunity? What's the good? What do we need to see happen? Well, okay, they give up 259 yards and 24 points to Alabama in the first half, but then they hold them to 138 yards and no points in the second half. Okay. And when you combine, I'm sort of combining this Tennessee and Alabama games because now we have at least two games. So we're 3-1. We played 4 games. That's a quarter of the season. We've had our off week as well. So we're actually, in the 6th week of the season, been through 5 weeks so far. But as far as the 12 games on our given schedule, we played a quarter of those. And what do we have to show for that? Well, we got 2 games that are meaty enough and that are things that we can compare and say, look, these are opponents that could be SEC competitors, challengers for the SEC championship as well, either with us or somebody else. If we don't make it, these are teams that could be playoff teams. People definitely came away from the Tennessee-Georgia game saying, hey, Tennessee's a playoff team, and Alabama is certainly back in the playoff consideration, and we're still hanging on there. So these are the games we want to compare. Well, what did we do? Well, we've already highlighted this, and you know it. We got our butts kicked in the first quarter in both games. I just said it, 21-7 in the Tennessee game, and effectively 14-0 in the Alabama game because they scored. They racked up most of the yards and the drive that finished in the second quarter, but it was in the first quarter. So they end up 14-0. Well, but in reality, when we break down these quarters, after the first quarter losing 21-7, Georgia wins the second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and overtime. Now, the game's still a 3-point game, okay? So that's how good Tennessee fought back during this whole thing. And when I say win, I just mean whether it's yardage, points, or all the above. Ultimately, I'm talking points. At the end of the day, when the dust settled, and if each quarter is a mini game, did you win it or lose it? We have 8 quarters that we're talking about here, 4 quarters in each of these 2 games. So Georgia wins the second, third, fourth quarter and overtime. Now, I'm not counting that as a quarter because It is what it is. But we did win the overtime clearly, or we would have taken the loss. Against Alabama, we lose the first quarter, 7-0. We lose the second quarter at the end of the day too. It may not have felt like. I mean, that's an interesting one. We'll break that down a little bit, but at the end of the day, Alabama wins the second quarter 17-14. We fought back and we played better, and there were good things, and we could have won the second quarter. We were on our way till that drive right before the half, but Alabama does end up winning the second quarter. But we win the third quarter, and the fourth quarter is a tie. Nobody scores in the fourth quarter. We score in the third quarter 7-0. So we win the third quarter 7-0, and the fourth quarter is a tie. So we won. We won 4 of the 8 quarters. And you say, well, that's 50-50, right? And look, that all the stats are going to point to this. You are sometimes what you are. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes you have these records where you're skewed. You play a terrible team in the beginning of the year, you crush them with a bunch of stats. You play a really good team, they beat you, and your stats get lopsided, and it's hard to tell what it is. And our stats are still very difficult to read a lot out of, even through 4 games, because us and most of the teams out there have still played a lot of lesser competition in those first couple games. But that's why we're going to zero in on these 2 games and talk about it. But in these 2 games, we really are our record, okay? We won 4 of the 8 quarters. So, basically that sort of points to, I mean, you certainly could have come out of that 2-0, but that's a lot to ask, statistically speaking. So, in another way, you could look at it and say, look, because we tied the fourth quarter with Alabama, we either won or tied 5 of 8 quarters. That's something, okay? And you held in 2 more quarters, whether there were 2 more quarters in the Tennessee-Alabama games where we held them to 1 score, whether we won those quarters or not, however you look at it. So that's also an interesting thing. So I guess, let me say it this way, actually. We had, here, we'll go down here. We'll take a look here. So I've got the notes down here. So here's actually how it breaks down. So I combined them just so we could sort of lay this out. So in the first quarter of the 2 games, we got beat 28-7. That's terrible, right? Okay, so you've lost the first quarter by 21 points combined. 21-7 against Tennessee, 7-0 against Alabama. So you lost the first quarter 28-7. Then against Tennessee, we won the second quarter 10-0. So that's great. But Alabama won the second quarter 17-14. And like I said, we were on the precipice of winning that quarter 14-10. 14-10. But we give them the ball back with a couple minutes to go in the half. They have that drive. And that may ultimately be where the game was really, I mean, look, when you win or lose by 1 score, you can always go to any different moment and say, well, this is the moment, this is the moment, this is the moment. So we don't know which one is the moment. None of them were the actual moment, right? Even when you get to the moment at the end of the game where you give up the score or the interception ends it, whatever it is, there's a bunch of moments in between there, right? That add up, and they all, when you flip the coin one way or the other on those moments, could have changed the outcome of the game. It may be just as important as defining, as much as I focused on that 4th down call and us not being able to tie or take the lead in the fourth quarter, despite having 3 times we had the ball with the opportunity to do that. As big as that is, it's worth noting that you may not even have gotten there if the defense was able to put Alabama into a 3-and-out. They had no timeouts, and less than about 2 minutes or less or whatever when they got the ball, they knifed through the Georgia defense without even facing a 3rd down, I think, or maybe only 1 3rd down on the drive. They score in 1 minute and 34 seconds with no timeouts, and they weren't even seemingly moving very fast. They were just able to get 10-yard plays, just dunk, 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 right down the field after we had righted the ship, after we had kind of fought our way back and got it back to, where it could have been a much closer game. And they go down and they're able to put that score, that touchdown right before the half. There's not enough time for us to answer. We don't answer. They end up winning the second quarter 17-14. Well, had we won that quarter 14-10, that would have changed the game a lot, right? That would have been decisive. So in the end, but even with that, We scored 10 points against Tennessee in the in the second quarter, and 14 against Alabama. So we end up winning in these two games, 24-17, the second quarter. Moving on to the third quarter, we win the third quarter 17-7 combined in the two games. We beat Alabama 7-0 in the third quarter, and we beat Tennessee 10-7. So we started losing ground a little bit there against Tennessee. You might remember we had the 10 and then they get the 7. So that's where they got that busted play and they got going again. Once they got going again, they were dangerous. Then in the fourth quarter, Alabama was a 0-0 draw. But against Tennessee, we narrowly won it. We won it 11-10, thanks to the 2-point conversion after the game-tying touchdown. But we did allow 10 points to Tennessee. Tennessee fought back in that game. Again, credit to them being a team that also isn't giving up. They didn't get blown out. They could have ended up, like we said a couple times, they could have lost that game by a couple scores, the way the momentum had shifted against them. But they fought back. They end up putting up 17 points in the second half, and they get it to a tie game, and they force the overtime, and they lose. So what's the net of this? Where am I getting at? Well, we lost the first quarter of these games combined, and we won the second, third, and fourth quarter. It was close against Alabama. Against Alabama, we lost the second quarter, but we won so well against Tennessee, it kind of overcomes it, and ultimately, combined, we won the second quarters of these games. So it just shows you how bad the first quarter is, that we end up basically, and the upshot of this is we scored 65 points in these two games, and we gave up 65 points in these two games. So again, another stat that points to split right down the middle, right? Hard to win, hard to be 2-0 when you scored 65 and you gave up 65. That basically suggests you have two ties. And look, we won a game by 3 points, we lost a game by 3 points. As bad as we feel about this Alabama game, we lost by 3 points. Okay. Again, you feel bad about it because you saw what they did to us in the first half, and it just felt like we were helpless and we were just being punched all over the field, and we're just boom, 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 taking blow after blow, right? But we right the ship, we get some points on the board. Then we have the big mistake of letting them get through us and get a touchdown right before the half. That ends up being a huge deal. Maybe not the only thing. But again, we continue getting better and better and keeping them off the board and limiting their opportunities, limiting their yardage. We fight back into the game. We win the second half against Alabama. The fourth quarter's a tie, but we won the third quarter. We were much more competitive. We only lost the second quarter 17-14. The net result is we were so bad in the first quarter. So this is the good, the bad, the ugly, right? The bad is we've been so bad in the first quarter of these two highly competitive games that even winning the second, third, and fourth quarters has not been enough to overcome it. It just gets us back to even. And that's where we are. We're 1-1. So we're right where we should be in almost every metric you could look at. You look at the yardage that we've accumulated. You look at Tennessee racked up, again, over 250 yards in the first half, and they end up getting about another 250, I guess, in the second half because they end up close to 500, or maybe they were even closer to 300 or over 300. But we slowed them down and shut them down significantly. We dominated the second and third quarters against Tennessee. Against Alabama, we almost dominated the second quarter and then slipped right at the end. But we dominated the third quarter. The fourth quarter becomes a little more even, and that allowed Alabama they didn't score, but they put up enough yardage to get the first downs to seal the game, right? And to keep us out of that. And they played well enough defensively to keep us from scoring, even if we made our own mistakes. So what does all that tell us? Or what does that mean? Why do we care? I think it points to something that I'm going to point to and start to say, look, this goes with the whole era discussion, the state of football, the state of the team, the fact that we're not as powerful as we used to be with just so many top flight players that we could, basically win a lot of these games on talent alone, not against an Alabama, but because they kind of had the talent to match, but against most of the other teams in college football. This maybe points to something that, look, I don't know for sure. And I just always want to qualify. I've said this recently too. Every coach out there, the ones that are under Billy Napier, hasn't been fired yet from Florida. Sam Pittman was just fired from Arkansas. These guys know more about football than all of us talking about it, could ever hope to know. And so as we sit here and talk about it, and it's not like they forgot it. It's not like they don't know the things that we point out or look at. But one thing that I am starting to have a sense of, as proud as I am of Kirby, and ever grateful for what he's done for our team, for the university, and the titles and the championships he's brought to us, I am starting to wonder if he's going to have to adapt a little bit the way he has been leading and coaching the team, that there's a sort of a new issue that could be at hand. And I've talked about this a lot during the season. We play our game, right? I keep saying that our mantra has been to, like, we're gonna play our game. We're gonna make the other team adjust to us. And I think one place that plays out, Kirby has a reputation, and it's happened each of the last 2 weeks, of being able to make amazing in-game and halftime adjustments, right? I mean, again, we got torched in the first half. In the second half, Alabama, half as many yards, no points. So we're able to make those adjustments. And I think the combination there is, and I don't have confirmation of this again from Kirby, we haven't sat and talked about it, but I think the general idea is that we plan to play our game and make the other team adjust and bend to our will. And then we will make the adjustments necessary during the game to correct what we see happening. So we start with kind of plan A, and then we veer where we need to make adjustments. We start to see them have some success in the passing game. We're not getting enough pressure. Then they'll dial up more pressure, and they will start to see, and you see that, like, oh, well, these plays that were open, now Georgia's getting pressure, and we go from having no sacks in the first half to maybe 3 sacks and a lot of quarterback hurries in the second half, and you see the team just start to take off and dominate. And you see this all the time. And maybe the best game I could think of, it's an excellent example of, like, the prototypical Georgia game of the last 5 to 8 years at our best, when we're at our most powerful, was the Florida game in the 2021 season. And if you remember this game, we start out and I don't think we scored at all. I don't think either team scored in the first quarter, or maybe we had a field goal. But early in the second quarter, whether we got the field goal in the first quarter or not, we're up 3-0. And then it starts to get a little bit later in the half. You're more than halfway through the second quarter, and we're up 3-0. Now, we're the number 1 undefeated team in the country at this point. We haven't won our first national championship in 40 years yet, but we're going to this season. So we know what this team is when you think back to this historically, right? So, but if you remember, what happened is, in a period of about 2 or 3 minutes just before the half, maybe it was as much as 7 minutes. I didn't go back and pull the stats on it. We rattle off 21 unanswered points, and a lot of it is defense, right? I mean, the defense has been playing great the whole game because Florida hasn't scored. Now, they weren't a great team that year, but I think that was the Anthony Richardson-led team, and despite the fact that he was a first-round draft pick, I think he was a terrible overall winning quarterback. I mean, he threw the ball to other team as much as he threw it to his team, and only averaged like 50% completion percentage. He was an amazing athlete, but there was little to show that he had developed as a high-level quarterback. So anyway, but he's the quarterback of the Florida Gators, and I think maybe they're deep in their territory, and we get a fumble. I don't remember what the sequence was, but we end up basically we get a turnover, and then it's a 1-play drive, and we score, and now it's 10-0. Then we get another turnover, and at least one of these turnovers was a fumble where Nolan Smith gets in there and strips the ball away from him in a big scrum or whatever. But anyway, without digging too deep into it, the long story short, it's 3-0, turnover, 1-play, touchdown, 10-0. Another turnover deep in their territory, 1-play, touchdown, 17-0. And then the sealer of the whole deal was, for whatever reason, Florida drops back, and after already just going from being down 3-0, closing towards the half, to now down 17-0, and late in the half, rather than try to run out the clock, they drop back to throw a pass, again deep in their own territory. You might remember this one. I know for sure I remember it. Kobe Dean intercepts the ball, runs it back for a pick six. Now it's 24-0. And I think this game highlights the prototypical Georgia game, the way Kirby Smart wants to coach and wants to play. When you have superior power, when you have superior capabilities, and you've coached and you've practiced harder than anybody else, and you're conditioned better than anybody else, and then you go out and you produce a winning game plan, which is based on execution, the way you should play, what should be available to score, but also not taking any crazy chances and being conservative. So you might have seen some games that started like that, where the end of the first quarter was 7-0 either way, right? But how many times did you see the Georgia team explode between the second and third quarters and go from maybe being up or down 7-0 to just like this game? In this case, like the Florida 2021 Florida game, like I'm talking about, we were up 3-0 in the second quarter, getting late in the second quarter, and all of a sudden it goes to the half and it's 24-0, and you never look back. And that was the prototypical Georgia game. But I think what's happening now is we don't have as much power, right? So we're not able to exert our will and our game plan. Other people are able to take things away from us the way we like to take things away from them. Other people are able to scheme and hold us down. And so there's this concept that we keep starting slowly, but it's not that they're coming out there and they're not playing like, oh, they're half-hearting, like, oh, we'll wait till we're down, then we'll start playing. When we talk about playing, starting slowly, it's just they're not getting results, but I don't think it's because they're playing without, again, fire, passion, energy. I think they're playing well. They're just not getting the execution, and or the other team is able to do some stuff. And so here's another perspective I was looking at. Think about some of the more competitive games. So all the time I bring up the idea that in any 12-game schedule, you probably have, if you're a team like Georgia, even where we are right now, and I say right now, again, just qualifying the idea that maybe this isn't elite Georgia talent like we're used to, but we are still going to win 8 or 9 games on our schedule, because when you look at the schedule, we are still clearly better than 8 or 9 teams. So we're going to win 8 or 9 of these games. So the games that are up for grabs are the ones where we play teams that are closer to us in terms of talent. And, you don't have to be 100% equal in talent. You only have to be close enough where just the talent isn't overwhelming, where you just literally, there's almost, when the talent is just overwhelming, when you're 50%, 100% better than them in talent index, if you had some way to rate that perfectly, right? But when you have that, then you have to do something colossally wrong, and or they have to do something amazingly unexpectedly right to get the game to a 50-50 opportunity where maybe they would end up winning on a last-minute field goal or you missing one. That's what has to happen in about 8 or 9 of these games. In the other 3 or 4 or 5 of these games in any given season, there are teams that maybe still don't have as much talent. They haven't had back-to-back first through third, ranked recruiting classes, and they haven't been able to bring in a Zachariah Branch from USC. Even though they brought in some guys in the portal. They weren't a 5-star guy like Zachariah Branch necessarily, right? So, but again, Alabama probably is as talented, if you have the talent index, Alabama is probably as talented as us, maybe in different places than us, but they have that kind of talent. Notre Dame last year, I don't think they were as talented as us, but they were talented enough. They had really good talent in their front line, maybe first and second team defense was incredibly talented, and they had just enough on offense. But again, they didn't win that game offensively. They won that game defensively. So, but again, we were not able to impose our will offensively. We also played really well defensively, and they didn't do a lot against our defense either. But, so then it comes down to mistakes, turnovers, unexpected plays, the kickoff return to start the second half where Notre Dame gets a touchdown. And that's not something, it's unexpected because that usually doesn't happen to our special teams. So looking at the last season and this season, look at some of these games where we're playing teams that have a higher level of talent, where we're not just going to overwhelm them. Alabama last year, what happened? We started out down 28-0. Tennessee last year at home, we go on to have a glorious victory, beat them down. Game really didn't look that competitive, but we spotted them a 10-0 lead. They started off hot, 10-0. Tennessee this year gets out to a 21-7 lead. And you might forget this, but the Georgia Tech game last year, and I know you say Georgia Tech equal talent. Look, Georgia Tech's not equal, okay, but they have just enough guys. Haynes King is a difference maker as a quarterback. They have some good running backs and receivers, and Brent Key is a offensive line guy, so he's building a stronger line. He understands the value of line play, so he's making them tougher, and he is imbued toughness. So they're playing above their head at the moment, maybe talent-wise, right? They're getting more talented. They're adding better talent, but they're not at the level of Georgia talent-wise. But they're playing with inspiration. They're inspired by their leader, their coach, and their on-the-field leader in Haynes King, who is as tough as nails. And so the combination of things makes them a dangerous team. They're a good team. Okay. They're 5-0 and ranked in the top 15 or top 18 or something right now. I forgot where they actually are. But so anyway, Mike, here's what I'm getting at. You might have forgotten because we all remember the 8 overtimes. We all remember that, that we tied it up, and you might not even remember that we were actually down, that we had to tie it up. But you might not remember how far we were down. We were down 17-0 at the half. We came back from 17-0 to make it 27-all at the end of regulation and then put it to overtime. Then you had the 8 epic overtimes that nobody forgets. So, and then you got Alabama this year. We get down 14-0. So I'm getting at this idea that, look, when we play better teams, better coach teams, better talent teams, of late, we're seeing a trend in some of these big rivalry games where we're not just starting off maybe slow and playing base and then adjusting and then we just bowl them over. That's the example of the Florida game, right? 3-0 going in the second quarter, getting late in the second quarter, but eventually the plan kicks in. We keep doing what we do. The plan kicked in, and we create 3 turnovers. We turn them into 3 touchdowns, and we're up 24-0. And that kind of game, it's very similar to the way the Arkansas game started a few years ago when Arkansas came to town and they were a top 8 team, and they were undefeated 4-0, and they came to Sanford Stadium and we were undefeated. And I think it was 27-0 or something like that very quickly in the second quarter. In that case, you'd say, oh, well, we started quick. Well, I think we did the same thing we always do. It's just that our core plan worked. Arkansas failed to execute. They turned the ball over. They false started. They punted from deep in their own territory. They didn't stop our offense, and that game got away from them quickly. We didn't have to do a lot of adjustments. Our big adjustment in the second half of that game was just putting in 3rd and 4th stringers. So, but here's my criticism, or here's the point I'm digging to, is I'm saying, it may be that Kirby, and I'm not saying he won't, and I'm not complaining. I'm just throwing this out. Food for thought, something we're all going to have to watch and keep an eye for. Kirby's not calling me for advice, and if he did, that would be stupid, okay? So, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about it and have our opinions, and maybe they're thoughtful opinions. Maybe when you hear this, you think, well, yeah, maybe this is. I think that the idea that I think one of the things Kirby may have to adjust to. Nick Saban adjusted. He's often talked about as the guy who did the most changing and pivoting in his career. That's how he wins 6 national championships in 17 years. Is he started out as a defensive backs, defense guru, and a game manager quarterback style. Then he eventually evolves to where, in the Bryce Young years, they're winning Heisman Trophy quarterback. You got a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, Heisman Trophy winning wide receivers, and you're throwing the ball all over the field, and you're averaging 48 points a game on offense. So Nick Saban evolved with the times. Well, our times have changed. We're not going to be able to amass overwhelming talent. So now more games are going to be like what we just described. They're going to be even. And look, our team, I complained or wondered a little bit if it was fair for Seth Emerson to say that it's not a very good team. I think we're still, if you look at the comparison, basically what you get from these games I'm talking about, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, actually they all do some things well and other things not as well. I mean, they all do different things well and different things not as well. But they're all pretty equal at the moment, it seems like. The net result of Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee games, Georgia at least playing Alabama and Tennessee, is that, we won one and we lost one. And all of the stats and all of the information shows it, but it does point to this one overwhelmingly clear idea, which is we're getting our head handed to us in the first quarter. So I have this sense that people are able to know these coaches, these good coaches with decent teams or better, have the advantage now of being able to look at this Georgia team and say, we know what Georgia's going to do. And we think we can do this against them. And we think we can do this against them. And we think they're going to try to do this against us. And the net result is they're starting out hot and we are starting out behind in all of these games. And to our credit, of these games that I just listed, we won more of them than we lost. Okay. But we did lose 2, and both of them to Alabama. Right. But But we started out down against Tennessee last year and this year, won them both. We started out 17-0 down against Georgia Tech at the half, came back to take it to overtime and win. Another overtime game, right? This year, we're down against Alabama 14-0. We never actually get back and even tie the game or take the lead. Last year, we're down 28-0. We actually come all the way back and we get ahead. We actually take the lead in that game and then give it up late. But that's sort of the point that we keep talking about, is when you play that well and you show grit, you show fire, you show passion, energy, you show a never give up spirit, you show that you have the talent to dominate part of the game, but not all of the game. But the difference is, and I made this point yesterday too, we're not just not dominating the beginning of the game, we're getting dominated in the beginning of the games, and then we're having to fight all the way back. And we're going to end up in more overtime games or 50-50 games that could go either way. And when you're a little bit better, maybe you win more than your fair share. I mean, the fair share of a 50-50 is I win one, you win one, right? Well, maybe we can win 3 out of 4 games when it comes down to one possession, one drive, a 3-point game like that. Maybe we can win that because we have good coaching, we have great players, we're playing with all the fire, passion, energy, we have the experience and the belief and the knowledge that we can and are a championship program. So those things, and I think that kind of came into play against Tennessee. The knowledge that you can do it seemed to make a difference at Tennessee. Maybe that's where I don't believe that Alabama's just in our head. I think if Alabama was a lesser team consistently, then you could say, oh, they're just in Georgia's head, okay? I didn't see anything about the way the guys played on Saturday that looked like they were intimidated or overwhelmed or scared. Like I said, no deer in the headlights look. They played hard. They just got beat. They got out-executed, especially in the first quarter and early in the second quarter. And then again late in the second quarter. And Alabama out-executed Georgia more than Georgia was able to we out-executed them for a big chunk of the game. They got more out of it. They got 24 points out of it, out-executing us. We only got 21 points, and so we lost the game by a field goal. We also fumbled the ball in our own territory, and that resulted in them getting a field goal, and we lost by a field goal. The last time we lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game, we lost 27-24. We fumbled the ball deep in our own territory. They got a field goal out of it. So again, when you play these games that are close or even games, it gets down to then the mistake. And that is, in these games against Tennessee and Alabama, we're losing the turnover battle by -1. We had 2 turnovers against Tennessee. They had 2 turnovers. Alabama had no turnovers. We had 1. So there's maybe the turnovers the difference in the game. Maybe the 4th down calls the difference in the game. Maybe their ability to score before the half. Pick any of those you want. But it all comes back to this idea that we can't keep getting beat 14-0, 28-0 to start the game. You can't get down to your rivals like even Georgia Tech and expect to come back and win from a 17-0 deficit game after game. You're going to have to do something different. You're going to have to look at the game plan a little differently. It feels like, and this is, again, just my gut instinct. I don't have any proof of this, but my gut instinct when I realized this set of things I'm telling you, my gut instinct is that other coaches know what we're doing. They know what to expect. And you know what? For the last 5 or 6, 7 years, didn't matter. We could line up and we could tell you what we're doing. Hey, we're going to run the ball. You're not going to be able to stop it. Hey, we're not even going to blitz you. We're just going to play straight up with our front 7, and we're going to cover you man on the outside, but you're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to be able to run the ball. You're going to try to run the ball. We're going to totally take the run away from you and make you one-dimensional. We could tell you that. Okay. And coaches knew that. And I think you would hear that if you think about it. How many times you heard the interview? Look, coach, how did you get down 24-0 to Georgia at the half? What are you going to do about it in the second half? Look, they didn't do anything we didn't expect. They're just really good, and we have to execute better. I mean, that's the coach speak you hear, right? Well, that's true. Well, I think in the 50-50 era, I think in the era where when we face the better teams, we had Tennessee game was close this year because we no longer have that huge gap, even on a team as good as Tennessee. Even a team like Tennessee that could win 10 games and go to the playoff, we were still a whole notch better than them. Well, maybe we're not that now. That doesn't mean we can't get in the playoff and win. Doesn't mean that we have to give up on the season, but it does mean that maybe it's time to look at the Georgia way of starting games and playing and expecting to make adjustments and say, we can't just expect to make adjustments because we're not playing the first part of the game even. We're not starting slow where the game is 7-3 and then we explode or we start to take control. We're getting hammered by these better teams. We're down substantially. And it's a miracle we've come back in these games. And it's a testimony to the adjustments they've made and the play of the players and the focus and the energy and the conditioning. What we talk about winning the fourth quarter. Well, look, we're winning the fourth quarter, but we're getting our butt kicked in the first quarter. So I'm all in favor of being the best team and the strongest team in the fourth quarter. But we're going to have to make some adjustments. And I don't know what they are for sure. I'm not here to tell you that. That's what we're going to want to see. That's what we're going to need to see as fans if we're going to have the real belief. We're always going to hope. We're always going to think, hey, as long as there's a chance, we got a chance to be national champion. Why not, right? Might as well be us. But if that hope is based on something substantial, like the real ability to do it, we're going to have to see not just the players adjust and play better and do better. We're going to have to see the coaches not come out there with a game plan that says they're going to have to change it up. They're going to have to surprise some people. Look, Mark Richt, one of the big differences in Mark Richt and Kirby Smart, and for most of the last, again, Kirby Smart's time here, this has been an advantage. Mark Richt, and there's no knock on him. I love Mark Richt, great man, and I'm so proud of what he did for the team and the university. But more of those teams, when I look back at it, we were often somewhere between 3rd and 10th in the recruiting rankings. And so we often were that team that had a little bit less talent against the heavyweights of the conference, whoever they were. They weren't always the same. Became Alabama. Sometimes we had an Auburn problem. Sometimes we had others. Auburn and Alabama are two that I think of who always consistently seem to have really dominant line play, both offensive and defensive lines. And it felt like for much of the time that I've been a fan of Georgia, we've had some good linemen, but never dominant line play. We've maybe had one guy who was a 5-star lineman recruit who went on to be an NFL player. We had like one at a time who would get drafted as pro, maybe some other guys who get a sniff or a practice squad. But one of the things Kirby Smart completely changed was he came in and he made this team dominant on both lines. And again, that gives you so much more leeway. But obviously, we're not dominant on those lines right now. Another good I want to point out, hey, look, I think the offensive line, I haven't gone back and rewatched the game. I don't know if I have the heart for it yet. I may not be able to do it until after we play and beat Kentucky, hopefully. Maybe then I'll have enough better feelings I could go back and watch this game and look for some of the details. My gut instinct from watching it in the moment, and when I watch it in the moment, I'm not taking notes to sit here and talk about this. I see what I see or I don't see it. So when I watched in the moment, my impression was that the line played better than we had seen. That they, obviously, we were able to run for 227 yards. There were some big holes. There was downfield blocking. They looked like they were doing a great job, and I know they focused on that. And I think coaches will tell you that sometimes it's a little easier to get guys into good run blocking than pass blocking. But then again, last year we couldn't run, but we did okay pass blocking. We didn't give up a lot of sacks on Carson Beck. And he generally had time to make plays downfield. When he didn't, drives kind of got blown up because we were a little bit one-dimensional. Well, now this year we're less one-dimensional. But when Gunnar tried, we didn't throw the ball a lot. Only 20 pass attempts. And that's because we didn't run enough plays because we only had the ball enough to run 53 plays. It's not enough, like we talked about yesterday. But those plays where we did throw the ball, Gunnar most of the time seemed to have enough time. And I only remember one sack, and even that was not really a true sack. It was more of a coverage sack. Gunnar dropped back, didn't see what he liked. He stepped up through the pocket. Then he decided to take off and run. By the time he did, a guy got him by the legs from behind, and he was like a yard short of the line of scrimmage. So it goes down as a sack. But in the flow of play, it didn't feel like he was dropped back and then a guy came in and just plowed him into the ground in the chest. It wasn't that kind of sack. And Alabama didn't really have any of those kind of sacks against us. I think they did. I think they used excellent overall team speed and energy to be all over the field. They basically had plays covered. They were downfield. They were everywhere. They made it hard for us. They had some lost yardage plays against us, but they were not dominant in that regard, and they didn't overwhelm us, and I think the line played pretty well. So I do want to call that out a little bit. I also think that What else was I going to say about that? Well, I think I think there were some good things like that we saw. So I think that the point, I guess, was but line played well, but it's not dominant. I mean, we're playing mix and match. We've got guys hurt. Even without the guys hurt, the guys who are in there are making mistakes. They're holding. They're making penalties. They're just not consistently dominating the game like we've seen them do. And same thing on defense. The defense has vastly improved. I mean, I think they are following the agenda like we've been saying. A goal of this year was to get back to stopping the run. Alabama was not successful running the ball. I mean, as much as in the end, they stuck with it enough and they had a good enough game plan that they didn't abandon the run. So they ended up getting a little over 100 yards. But generally speaking, we took the run away from them and forced them to be one-dimensional. Another thing that's another good thing we need to point out is the damning stat of that they converted 13 of 19 first downs is unbelievable. I mean, 13 first downs against us, and that they converted like 64% or above. That's horrible. But the flip side of that, there's a good, which is I said coming into the game, I thought our defense would play better, limit the big play, and force them to move the ball down the field. As you hear some people jokingly say, matriculate the ball down the field. Well, they did. Our defense did that. I mean, the flip side of that stat is that we forced them into 19 third downs. I mean, that the defense was doing what it was supposed to do on first and second down. It wasn't getting gashed. We didn't give up a ton of big plays. Ryan Williams dropped what could have been the one long touchdown. They had some long plays, but none of them were the deep bombs down the field like Tennessee took. And I don't know if that was that they didn't want to, or we were getting enough pressure and that Ty Simpson was just smart with the ball. He didn't see the downfield option, so he took the shorter options. I think that they came into the game, I think where we got outcoached a little bit here, I think they came into the game knowing what I was talking about before the game, which is they wouldn't be able to run the ball and that we would try to run the ball. So they controlled the game. They ended up with that huge time of possession and more plays run because they controlled the game with their passing game. They used their passing game as an extension of the run game. You don't always have to run the ball just to bleed clock, okay, or just to possess it. So they possessed the ball with a passing game and minimal running game, and that was brilliant coaching. That was recognizing. I think they came in. I think they learned from what we did against the Tennessee game. I think they saw that and said, look, they had been a big play offense in a couple of their other wins when you go back and look at them. They gashed Wisconsin the week before the off week with big plays. But I think they knew that if they came in and couldn't run the ball and only scored on big plays or only got big plays out of it, that the same fate would happen to them as what happened to Tennessee. And the ability to eat clock, even just... There was a drive that they had in the fourth quarter where we gave them the ball back, and Ryan Williams picked up, again, it was one of these moments where it was 3rd and 9 from the shadow of their own goalpost, and they got a 9-yard pass or a 10-yard pass to Ryan Williams, and he just slips out to the side and nobody picks him up. It's an easy catch and throw and catch, and he gets the first down. He steps out of bounds or whatever. But they were able, that first down allowed them to eat another 4 minutes off the clock before they had to punt. Just another, I mean, that's a drive for us. That's one less opportunity that we had in the game to get the ball and maybe get that game tying or game winning score. So, and it was just a key first down. I mean, otherwise they had been 3 and out and punting from the run. We kept getting the ball at midfield. Well, that's when they drove out to midfield and they punted us deep into our own territory. And then we drove back to midfield and then had to punt it to them for the last time. And they got the ball back with 3 minutes and 19 seconds to go. And they ran the clock out from there. So again, that reduced they did just enough, and they recognized, they knew the assignment. They understood what they were going to get and not get. And they schemed against us well. And I just think that the idea might be that we're going to have to think about our scheming a little differently. We're going to have to think about not just playing our game all the time. We're going to have to do some things, especially in the first quarter, that surprise some teams, especially when we play these better teams. And Mark Richt used to be that kind of guy. Some of the ones you remember are motivational, right? The blackout against Auburn, which then of course went poorly against Alabama. So motivational things don't always work, right? The big blackout hype when Alabama came that year in the Alabama blackout turned into just a mushing. and it was terrible. And then we never wanted to do blackouts again, right? So that ended the big Florida celebration. But Mark Richt also was sort of a master of scheming around the fact that he didn't have the best lines always. And I was making this point a minute ago, but when Kirby came in, that's where he particularly elevated the recruiting. We've always been able to get a good quarterback or a top-notch quarterback. We've always been able to have an elite wide receiver or two. We've always been able to have elite skill guys at running back, a skill position in general. Georgia's been able to attract elite players. We've been able to attract elite defensive players. But what Kirby really did differently than Mark Richt is he attracted just bevies of elite talent at offensive and defensive line. And so we became a team that could just impose its will on both sides of the ball. And then also had the talent to just then take that dominance at the line and then just stuff the hobnail boot in your face, right? With the execution from the elite athletes at the skill positions. Well, we still have a lot of great skill people, and last year was a down year on the skill people, right? Our running backs and our run game was not as elite as it had been, and our wide receivers turned out not to be as elite, and there was a lot of drops. But right now, we've got some great wide receivers. I mean, I am really happy with what we've seen Zachariah Branch has been awesome, right? And London Humphreys is coming on and looking good, and Colby Young, who we missed a lot last year, obviously, he has been, not only can he out jump people for a jump ball, but he's got a 45-yard deep ball, so he's able to run a go route and get a deep ball. And then the way he fought for yards in the game, how many times did he either have a lost yardage screenplay that he made at least 2 or 3 yards out of, or a 1 or 2 or 3 yard play that he made an 8-yard play out of in the game against Alabama? He looked great doing that. And he doesn't look like this big bruising guy, but he fought for tough yards. So I'm really happy with that. And I know that one of the ways that our run game was so effective is that our tight ends were also throwing a lot of blocks. Again, I haven't watched all the details, but the tight ends are pulling and blocking and hitting the ends and opening up opportunities for the run game. But again, scheme-wise, our tight ends are too good to go through a whole game like the Alabama game, and none of them had a catch. Okay. And we talked about they weren't as prevalent in the Tennessee game as we thought they should be. And frankly, they haven't seemed as prevalent in any game. And so scheme-wise, I'm glad that I know if our offensive line is not as strong as it used to be, then we're using tight ends to help out, to help open up opportunities for the run game. But then we need a scheme off of that so we surprise some people. We're going to have to start doing some things that people don't expect us to do, because clearly they come into these games, these other coaches, with good teams and good coaches, and they're coming into these games and they know what they think we're going to do, and their execution in the first part of the game, the part that they draw up when you know this is what we're going to try and do, and after that you have no idea what's going to happen. That's why teams don't script every play of the whole game, but they script their first or second drive on offense, right? These are the plays we're going to run. Well, what these guys are scripting against us is killing us. And what we are trying to do against them, more often than not, they know what we're going to try and do. They see it coming. Do we overall call pretty good games, get the offense moving and have a shot? Yes. Do we have generally good offensive game plans and good execution? Yes. But we are being out-schemed at the juncture, the beginning of the game. We are being shut down on offense, and we're getting torched on defense. And the coaches really need to not just look at the players, but they're going to have to look at themselves and say, what can we do to surprise some of these teams? They know what they think Georgia is. They're going to come in here and say, this is what we think we can do against them. In the past, we were too powerful. They could say, this is what we're going to try and do, and we could stop it. And then we could start executing our plan and just go from winning a little bit to winning a lot as the game went on. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So I'm happy with the fire, the passion, the energy. I love the attitude from the players who are, to a man, are out there with quotes talking about how they want to get back on the field. They can't wait to play again. They're mad. And I believe them. And I do think that they are a team of heart. They are a team of passion, and they are a team that, we should be proud of because they represent the school well. They fight and they never give up. A couple players I wanted to call out. I just want to say, I talked about just before the game last week that, as the season emerges, as this game goes, if we were going to win this game, you're going to start to hear some names of guys emerge. Well, we didn't hear as much because you didn't get the big sack. the big moment maybe we were waiting for, where it was third, we force them into 3rd and 13, and one of our players gets the sack, maybe even a fumble, and turns the course of the game. Well, that didn't happen in the Alabama game. But guys who I heard called a lot and who made a lot of plays, and especially as the game wore on and we were stronger defensively, Kyron Jones and Quintavious Johnson. Those are two names that I started hearing a lot in this game, and I think we're going to hear more from them. I mentioned Jordan Hall being a guy who, when he was recruited, he's a 4-star guy, but he was a guy that a lot of people said might be the next Jordan Davis. And he's been injured a lot. He had stress fractures in his legs. He's just had a hard time being on the field, but he's been on the field a lot so far this year, and he had a great play. He's a down lineman up front, so you're not always going to see a lot of sacks or stats from him. But he had one play where he drifted downfield on one of those screen passes and followed the guy who was blocking him but didn't get blocked. And then when the running back caught the screen pass, he just pulled him down. And the play had gone backwards enough that it looked like it was downfield, but the net of it was they'd only gained a yard or two. And even worse than that, though, there was nobody else there. Had he not gotten there or been there, then that play would have bust for a huge bunch of yardage. And chances are Alabama would have scored in the second half off of that drive had that play gone for what it could have, and Jordan Hall not been where he was and stopping that play. And so they might have scored, and had Alabama scored at all, obviously, in the second half, then it probably would have put the game out of reach for us. Joseph Jonah Ajoyne had some nice plays. I saw him make some plays, and he's becoming more of a force. We know KJ Bolden and Dalen Everett are guys that we expect to be good in the secondary. We're still expecting more from Ellis Robinson, and I know that it was disappointing to see the penalty he had, and he got torched for at least one touchdown. He made a play. He did defend another ball that maybe forced them into ending up with their field goal that they ended up with, I think. So he might have defended a pass deep in the end zone. So it wasn't all bad, but we're still expecting him, a former 5-star guy, to emerge more. Chris Cole had a sack. Raylan Wilson and C.J. Allen, we didn't hear a lot from. And Christian Miller, I know, was in the game the whole time and playing hard. Again, the D-line did a good job, at least, stuffing the run up front and forcing Alabama to be one-dimensional. We just weren't able to take advantage of that one dimension. We did keep the ball in front of us, and we made them end up in 19 third downs. We just, had we flipped that, the game would have been totally different had we flipped it. And instead of them being 13 of 19, had we forced 19 third downs and they only converted 6 and we stopped 13, then we probably win this game by 2 scores. And everybody's celebrating. And, I'm sure the difference, that's where you always hear the mantra in football, it's a game of inches. Well, that's where the inches are. I'm sure that half of those third downs were plays that could have gone either way, just by a little bit. Guy makes the tackle here, we stop him just there. Guy's in position here, doesn't overrun it, whatever. We get a little more pressure on him so Simpson doesn't have as accurate a throw. Whatever it is, you flip that script. You did what you wanted to on first and second down. You forced third down. You got to flip that script on third down. And against the better teams, against Kentucky, you'll see it. Against other teams, the 8 or 9 games that we're going to win on our schedule guaranteed, you're going to see it. The question is, will you see it in the better games? So I think these are all good things. I think those are the things I want to point out. Also, I feel bad about Frazier fumbling. I know he's got to get both hands on the ball, and we didn't see him a lot in the game. Chauncey Bowens, also big shout out to him. It's great. It's lost in the, I don't know how long it's actually been since we had a back go over 100 yards, but I think it's been a while. Frazier, I think, had a 100-yard game last year, or maybe Etienne, but we haven't been having them with the regularity you'd think, and we don't even, the way we play, in a perfect world, we have 3 guys that are going to get 75 yards each, right? And we're going to generate 250 yards. We're going to have 5 different guys get carries. So we're not really set up to have a bunch of guys go with 100 yards, but Chauncey Bowens ripping off over 120 yards against Alabama with like a 7-yard per carry average, big kudos to him. And so if Frazier can get healthy, and I don't mean healthy like physically healthy, I mean healthy with mentally healthy, holding onto the ball, playing with the kind of passion, or not the kind of passion, but the kind of execution that we saw at times from him last year, and the coaches can believe in him to block and hold on to the ball, then I think we're working towards that 1-2 tandem that we want to see. And then you got the rest of the guys to start getting carries. So, I think that I think that's kind of I think that's the good, the bad, the ugly. I think there was good things in there. I think we did some good things. Look, we're winning half of these games. It's just we're losing them too much. And we need to get back onto that we're holding even and then winning half the games. And when we win half the games, we want it to look a little more dominant. Referencing that Florida game and that Florida, or I mentioned the Arkansas game back from the 2021 season. I mean, those are the games that we haven't really seen this team do much. When another team comes in highly ranked, not just beat them, we beat Tennessee 31-17 last year, but again, we spotted them the 10-0 lead because they came in prepared and they took it to us. Then we made adjustments and then we went from there. We need to see this team be able to get out in front of people a little bit more. And I don't think we're going to do it by overwhelming them with power. I think the parity is too much now. So I think we can't just wait and adjust. I think we're going to have to start expecting to do what people used to. And this goes back to the 80s too. One of the things Bobby Bowden, I referenced, Bobby Bowden at FSU had this amazing record, again, 14 years straight of top 5 finishes. Well, Bobby Bowden was also the master of the timely trick play. You might have heard of the fumble Ruski, various different plays. I mean, the fumble Ruski is a great play where the center snaps the ball, but instead of everybody goes through the motions, but he puts the ball on the ground to the side while making a motion. It looks like he snapped it back to the quarterback. Everybody else makes moves and starts moving around like they're running a play. And then somebody else, sometimes even a lineman, somebody else, the ball just sits there. It's a risky as heck play because you literally take the ball and just put it on the ground. And you hope that all the motion and smoke and mirrors distracts the defense and nobody notices the ball sitting there. And when everybody else kind of clears away from the line and the fake play is developing to the right or downfield, then somebody, sometimes even an offensive lineman, picks up that ball that's just sitting there and then just starts running down the field at the other side where nobody is. Great play. I'm not saying I want to see a bunch of trick plays or fake punts or onside kicks, but it's time that we get more creative like that. We're going to have to become the master of. And look, Kalen DeBoer, for all the criticism he came into this game and he went against himself. I said he did put the game on his quarterback, but he didn't put the game on his quarterback for having to win one-on-one matchups 30 yards downfield over and over again with his quarterback and wide receiver. They were willing to take what the defense gave them, and they just executed. And they knew they needed to do that, I think, to control the game anyway. They didn't want to just, go in, either score or punt and leave Georgia with tons of opportunities to score and win the game. They kept the Georgia offense off the field by grinding out with their passing game. And that was a real change of their strategy, but they did it. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. And they even threw in, their change of pace. They had the big man, throw where they have their star offensive lineman, get a pass and he rumbles down for a first down and, I'm just saying they got creative and they worked around their deficiencies. What Kalen DeBoer did the best in this game, and we're going to have to start doing more of, is recognized his deficiencies. He and Ryan Grubb, his offensive coordinator, knew they weren't going to pound it down. They weren't going to get a lead and then pound it running the ball. They didn't try to. They knew they weren't going to. They expected the Georgia defense to rally and be better overall covering than we were against Tennessee. And they didn't want to put the ball up in 50-50 situations as much as that. They wanted to control the clock, the time of possession, the plays. They did all that. And that allowed them to play just enough keep away to win a game on the road when they too are a team of deficiencies. They just coached around them. And we did not coach around our deficiencies quite as much. And that especially in the first quarter. And that's 2 games in a row and a trend that we've seen over the last year or two that we are not getting off. It's not a hot start. It's not about guys coming out and playing hard in the first quarter and loafing in the first quarter and then playing hard in the second, third. It's about being prepared and presenting something different, surprising some people. I just don't think we're going to be able to line up and just be Georgia all the time anymore and expect to win that way. So that's kind of the ugly, the good, the bad, the ugly, I guess. The good is all the good things I said about the players and what we did right. The bad are the things that we need to correct. And the ugly is the recognition that, I feel ugly about calling out anything about Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart, I mean, again, it's there's not a statue on campus of him yet. There probably should be. Nick Saban had a statue out in front of his stadium while he was still coaching. I wouldn't be upset if we did the same thing. But that's not the point. And even the greatest of us, even all of us, have to learn, have to grow, have to change and adapt. I know Kirby knows that. I'm sure they're looking for the answer. And I hope we find it soon. I hope we continue to see it. So I don't know that that's all of Alabama. I think tomorrow we dig into a little bit about what this game really means in the big picture. What did the other teams do? What do our grid teams look like? Who's in, who's out? And what is the perspective, and how do we compare? I mean, that's still the name of the game, right? It's not just about being what we used to be or what we want to be. It's about what do we compare to what's out there. That's where opportunities are still going to lie. So we'll dig into that some more tomorrow. I think we'll have time to do that before we start looking a little bit more into Kentucky. Kentucky is an SEC game, but I'm not sure that we have to spend that much time breaking that one down. I think it's going to be a lot simpler than that. So we'll get a chance to wander a little bit. So I hope this is both thought-provoking but starts to build in the right direction, where we all feel a little bit better about what could be and should be, but realistic about what we need to see as well and where we are. So realism is tough for a fan. That's not really the word. Fanatic doesn't really deal with realism, but I guess we'll just have to do our best. So think on that. I hope you'll be back tomorrow. We'll dig into the rest of college football a little bit more and get some perspective on where we are, what all this means, what we think it'll mean over the next couple weeks. Thanks for joining. Please share any comments, share with other Bulldog fans, other football interested fans. I hope you have a great day, and go Dogs.